All right, guys, for this week's dYdX segment, we have Vishal, co founder of Stride Labs, the leading liquid staking provider in the Cosmos ecosystem. So, Stake dYdX recently launched. Can you explain a bit about how Stake dYdX works?
Yeah, absolutely. So dYdX is super interesting and it's a little bit different than other LSTs. So the way STDYDX works is users will comment with their dYdX and liquid stake it. So what this means is they'll sign some transaction on the dYdX chain, so on liquid stake. Um, those funds will then get automatically sent to the Stride blockchain and automatically converted to STDYDX, which is delivered to the user. On the back end, what happens is the dYdX Stride will send it to an account that it owns on the dYdX chain. And when we mean by owns, the way Stride works is kind of unique. It's not like this account is owned by multisig or a validator or something like that. It's actually owned by the Stride blockchain. So it has the same kind of trust properties as any sort of POS chain. And for Stride, it's backed by billions of dollars economic security. So it's a very kind of trustless and decentralized custody of these tokens. Um, After Stride gets the dYdX, it goes and stakes it on the dYdX chain. But here's where it starts to get a little bit interesting. dYdX, as some of you may know, doesn't give inflationary yield in dYdX token. Rather, it streams USDC revenue from traders and users of the dYdX protocol to its stakers. But Stride needs to convert this USDC back to dYdX to help to restake it and allow for compounding and all sorts of benefits. And the way it does that right now is, I think, pretty novel. So it takes that USDC and trustlessly sends it to Osmosis, another account that the Stride blockchain owns, and then will automatically kind of trade that USDC for dYdX. And does this, it batches it up, so it only trades once every hour, does in a relatively small size, make sure there isn't enough slippage. They'll be executing these trades, converts that USDC to dYdX, then sends that dYdX back to the dYdX chain and restakes it. And so from the user's perspective, let's say I liquid stake one dYdX, I get back one STDYDX. The token doesn't rebase, but through time, as you get the USDC real yield, the one STDYDX can be redeemed or traded for more than one dYdX. So in a year, for example, one STDYDX might equal 1.2 dYdX.
That's a really clever design for a token that's, USDC bearing for stakers. So thanks for explaining that. How has adoption been thus far?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've seen pretty good adoption early on for STDYDX, right around $3 million in TVL, with around $1 million in liquidity. We're expecting that we've seen pretty healthy growth on that so far. We're expecting some pretty good traction going forward too, with a number of kind of really interesting integrations with STDYDX on lending markets, even stable coins, perp markets, etc., as well as a few kind of custodial solutions kind of coming forward, and a pretty large Stride airdrop for early users as well. So we've seen good growth in that, and we're expecting pretty good growth going forward as well.
I think one thing that users are familiar with is liquid staking, at least within an EVM context, but within the Cosmos ecosystem, right? What benefits does liquid staking bring for users? And perhaps what are the current limitations?
Yeah, it's a great question. So some of the benefits are kind of the same as anywhere with Ethereum as well. But you get so for Cosmos chains, there's kind of this fundamental trade-off that most chains have between staking yield and DeFi. For Ethereum, it's not as large of a concern because most of the kind of base currency is ETH, which has relatively low staking yield. For most Cosmos chains, they care a lot about the chain having really high economic security. For something like dYdX, for example, it matters a lot that the chain has high security so that traders feel comfortable trading on it, depositing large amounts of collateral, and it really makes the chain kind of function better. But in order to get that high economic security, the chain has to pay pretty significant yield to stakers. And while all this helps secure the chain, it makes it really hard to use that dYdX elsewhere. So if you want to, for example, mint a stablecoin against your dYdX, or you want to deposit it as collateral in lending market, or even use it on AMM like Uniswap, you're foregoing this 15-20% staking yield that the dYdX token offers. And it generally makes it so very little DeFi will occur on the token. But with liquid staking, you can kind of get access to this yield benefit without having to compromise participating in DeFi. And one thing we've noticed is the rate of which LSTs are used in DeFi is significantly higher in Cosmos than any other ecosystem. And a large part of that we think is because you have this really high kind of staking yield. One thing that's really neat for dYdX is they have a really big priority on MEV, in particular from validators not doing MEV extraction. So there's a whole kind of framework that we can talk about that dYdX tries to enforce on validators about to try to help encourage validators to not not basically MEV extract dYdX users. But for a lot of the people who delegate stake on dYdX, a lot of this is totally abstracted away from them. They're believers in the protocol, believers in the product, but not necessarily aware of all the politics of the validators. Liquid staking helps do is kind of provide one layer of abstraction on top of this. And Stride really prides itself in having a really high quality delegation strategy. But Stride tries to take all this stuff into account. So how much contribution is the validator doing to the protocol? Is the validator MEV extracting? Is the validator running performing infrastructure? Are they doing stuff with go-to-market? We can help kind of better the decentralization of the validator set. Two other kind of quick benefits I just want to highlight. One is for dYdX, because there's USDC yield, a lot of users might just want to hold their dYdX position. So they're like, hey, I'm in dYdX. Here's a percentage that has my portfolio. And that they're not necessarily checking in every day or every week to do something with the USDC or to reinvest it. But with Stride, you can just hold your dYdX and you know exactly how large your dYdX position is. And it also leads to buy pressure on the dYdX token from users who say, hey, I don't want the USDC. I want that to go right back into dYdX. That's the token I really believe in. The last thing, and this depends on your jurisdiction, but with the USDC, a lot of jurisdictions treat staking income as short-term capital gains or income, or just like dividend income. But dYdX, you're just holding a token that's not rebasing. Under some jurisdictions, it might be long-term capital gains. So for users who want to hold dYdX for a long term, they can significantly make it much more tax efficient to hold the LST version. But there are some kind of limitations and two kind of big ones to highlight. And we hope these will get addressed over time. But one is liquidity. So if you're kind of a large user, you want to hold like a 8-figure dYdX position. You want to have confidence that you can exit that position quickly in order to get maximal utility from the liquid nature of your LST. What we observed is over time, liquidity will build up. Right now, there's right around $1 million of liquidity, which is enough for most retail users, but not necessarily enough for whales. But we hope that kind of liquidity will increase. Another thing is the LST is really useful if you can use it in duration. So if you can mint stable coins against it, deposit as collateral and borrow against it, trade with it on lots of pairs on AMMs. We have like 6 or 7 integrations for dYdX. We're hoping to kind of expand that to the whole suite of DeFi applications in Cosmos, but also on Ethereum, Solana, etc. Through time.
Wow, that was awesome. That was like a ton of information. We could definitely do a whole podcast on this. So maybe sometime in the future we can do that. But unfortunately, we're out of time here. We will be sure to link to Stride's documentation, the site, as well as your Twitter, Vishal. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited about dYdX and see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, let's get over to Hot Seat, Cool Throne.